Meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council. It's Tuesday, June 21st, 2021. I'm the Chair Council Member Robert Lilligren. We're joined by a quorum of the committee and excellent staff as well. So committee members, we will move down the agenda. First is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next is the approval of the June 6, 2022 Community Development Committee minutes. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Great. Any discussion, changes, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
That carries. We'll move right on to our consent agenda. 3 items. One concerning the city of Blaine, one the city of Lakeville, and one Luce line. Medicine Lake, Shingle Creek, and Northeast Diagonal LRT Regional Trail Master Plans. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Second. And in discussion, hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
And now on to the business items. The first non-consent business item is 2022-144, the annual Metropolitan Regional Parks Operation and Maintenance Allocation. And we have a presentation from Heather. Giesel, is it?
It is Giesel, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Giesel. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Lilligren, committee members, my name is Heather Giesel. I am the Grants Manager for Community Development and Metropolitan Transportation Services. I am here today to discuss business item 2022-144, which is the annual Metropolitan Regional Parks Operations and Maintenance Allocation. So what is operations and, do I have to advance here? There we go. What is operations and maintenance? Minnesota Statute 473.351 requires that by July 15th of each year, MPOSC report to the council the funding requests from the implementing agencies based on the actual expenditures made in the previous year. The state legislature funds a portion of the expenses necessary to run the regional park system because the system draws a significant percentage of its visits from outside the metropolitan area and the state of Minnesota. The law requires that the council review the operating expenses of each agency for eligibility on an annual basis. So the operation and maintenance formula is provided by state statute. It is 40% based on the previous year's operation and maintenance expenses, 40% based on the previous year's proportionate share of total system visits, and 20% based on previous year's proportionate share of total acreage. In this table here, you will see the estimated 2023 O&M distribution. The first column is the reported expenditures from each of the agencies, and then the column on the right is the estimated distribution amount that totals the $9.99 million that's been allocated by the state. So just a funding recap, the total appropriation for this year is, or for 2023 is $9.99 million, $2.54 million from the state general fund, and $7.54 in lottery in lieu of sales tax revenue. So final pass-through amounts will be based upon actual appropriations and revenues received. And just as a note, as of the writing of this business item, the 2021 visitor study is still being finalized. But this business item must move forward in order to satisfy that July 15th statutory deadline. It is anticipated that by the time this goes to council on July 13th, that we will have the final visitor study numbers and therefore the final allocations that will go to each of the agencies. So the recommended action is that the Metropolitan Council accept the Regional Park System State Fiscal Year 2023 Operation and Maintenance Report as shown in Table 1. Oops. There we go. As shown in Table 1. And
Thank you.
I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Giesel, for the report. Committee members' questions. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I do have a comment, though, my usual annual comment about how state law says that the state legislature is supposed to cover 40% of the operation and maintenance costs for our park system. Quick math with my phone calculator puts it at a little over 8.3%, and that's been a gradual decline the entire time that I've been at the council. So it's not one particular party that's at fault. It's kind of an equal opportunity, not take care of our regional parks obligations kind of a thing that's going on, which is unfortunate because our parks are a great asset to the state, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, thanks for your annual observation, Councilmember Wolf. And do you recall when you first came on the council what the percentage of the?
It was around 15. The highest it ever got was 17, and it's been dropping ever since.
Thanks. And just to note, Councilmember, thanks for bringing Councilmember Wolf in the impact then on some of the local agencies as well, and it compels them to not just meet their shares on, but to exceed that sometimes. So, good point. Committee members, other questions, comments? Hearing none, the recommended action is that we accept the Regional Park System State Fiscal Year 2023 Operation and Maintenance Report. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Ms. Giesel.
Thank you.
Our next non-consent business item is 2022-176. It's the funding recommendations for the 2022 Round 1 Tax-Based Revitalization Account grants. And Mr. Martin is here to present. Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for putting this item on your agenda today. I am Marcus Martin. I work in Livable Communities as the coordinator for what's known as the Tax-Based Revitalization Account, sometimes known as the Brownfield Grant Program. So a little background, the statutory goals for the Tax-Based Revitalization Account are helping clean up contaminated properties for redevelopment that will increase the tax base and either add jobs or affordable housing for cities that participate in the Livable Communities Act. And we've had great participation.
Marcus, can you forward the slides?
Yeah, for sure. I keep forgetting that these are not all linked together. My apologies. All right. Funding for the grant program was approved as part of the Livable Communities Distribution Plan, approved by the council back in March. Half of the $5.5 million, that is $2,750,000, will be available to be awarded in this funding cycle. Let's take a look at where they're from. We received 3 SEED, that's Seeding Equitable Environmental Development applications. All of those projects were from Minneapolis. And we also received 6 contamination cleanup applications located in Golden Valley, Minneapolis, Rogers, St. Louis Park, and St. Paul. The total amount requested was just over $5 million. So the grant evaluation criteria is organized into 3 main categories: project outcomes, project process, and capacity of the project team. A more detailed table of this process is in the fund distribution plan itself. So these are our statutory funding limits. The guiding statute limits the amount of funding that can be awarded to projects in a single city. That's 50%. And also to projects in Minneapolis and St. Paul combined. That's 75%. So based on the funding that we are making available this cycle, the limits are $1,375,000 and $2,023,000. So before I get into the SEED recommendations themselves shown here on the screen, I'd just like to offer some background as a comment. As I mentioned earlier, we did receive 3 SEED applications from the city of Minneapolis. Applications in this grant category are expected to encourage redevelopment on sites that have low levels of building activity, but higher concentrations of low-wage jobs. low-income individuals or people of color, and they're not expected to have a specific project, but show potential for jobs or housing. In this case, all 3 of the applications showed enough progress to be considered redevelopment projects rather than sites. But since the projects really exceeded the criteria and met the intent of the seed grants, all 3 of the projects shown here, Coliseum, the Native American Community Clinic, and the 1500 East Lake Street are being recommended for funding. So I'm going to pause there for a moment if you have any comments or questions about that. All right. So next is the cleanup funding. These are typically the majority of our recommendations. So 6 out of the 9 cleanup applications received are recommended for funding. That is for Northrop King Residential, for $527,400. Wooddale Station redevelopment, $477,000. Calvary Apartments, $678,500. 115 Plato at $110,100,000. Wooddale Apartments at $184,300,000. The Golden Valley Business Center at $464,400. Go to the totals before we return to the unfunded. A total of $2,610,800 is recommended for funding. This does meet the single city and combined Minneapolis and St. Paul funding limits. The balance of the funding, that would be available in the next funding cycle in November. Question, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Councilmember Chambliss, sorry about
okay.
that.
Thank you, Chair. I was just, our Calvary, I didn't see in the notes why they didn't get the full amount, and it was reduced by about 200,000.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Councilman, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In this case, it was because of that statutory funding limit.
Okay.
So we fully fund the projects in kind of order of priority, and in that case, there just wasn't enough beyond that for the full amount.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Chambliss.
So would they be able to come back in another cycle, or is that request done?
Councilmember Chambliss, Chair. Yes, they could reapply. What we would ask is that they don't incur the cost for the additional portion before applying.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a follow-up on that. So it appears that the seed applications are combined with those other 2, put them over and caused Calvary to not get as much money. Does the city have say on how many applications come in so that that's sort of figured out at their level? Or did we decide seed comes before Calvary?
Mr. Merton?
Councilmember Wolf, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. We take, because we authorize all of the statutory limit applies to the whole account, so we just apply it to all of the applications that would be recommended for funding. In terms of your question, in terms of the prioritization between the accounts, that is a city role and a city, and I know that they had some discussions before applying with me about things like eligibility and which ones, but ultimately it is up to the city council and their resolution.
Okay.
In terms of which they put forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merton?
All right. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here about the 3 unfunded. So 3 projects are not recommended for funding. The first 2 projects on the left, that's Hillcrest and Rogers Main Street, did not have a competitive score. In the case of the Hillcrest, the redevelopment was just not sufficiently ready for funding. We'd like to see a little bit more progress on the development plan before they reapply if they choose to do so. My understanding is that they have made progress since the initial deadline, May 2nd deadline, but that wasn't reflected in their materials there. And there's more to come. It's certainly a very large and site that's important to the city. The Main Street Rogers redevelopment had a low tax base increase per grant dollar and somewhat less compact and less robust community engagement process than the competing applications. However, this application is recommended to reapply. We did feel it did clear what we expect, and so it's more of a case of the competition itself. If the competition changes, I think they would be in a favorable position. There's a good chance. The last project on your right, that is the North Star project. That also had a low projected net tax capacity increase per grant dollar. And that's a ratio that we look at. And given that high cost of abatement was the main factor for this site. This is a hotel conversion project. The project also didn't include affordable units for populations of the highest need in the immediate area. It was considered more of a workforce project that is still eligible but less of a priority in our current criteria. I'll pause, see if there's any questions about those.
Any questions, committee members? Mr. Martin?
So in closing of the prepared remarks, the recommendation to this committee is that the Metropolitan Council award 9 tax-based revitalization account grants totaling $2,610,800 to the cities of Golden Valley, Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, and St. Paul, as shown in Table 1 of the business item, and authorize its Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Great. Committee members' questions on that report? Hearing none, Director Barajas is asked to say a few words, I think, about the judge's ruling on the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, you may have read in the paper last week that a local judge has ordered that the city of Minneapolis cease implementation of their 2040 comprehensive plan and revert to their 2030 plan. There's a whole lot of question marks about what that means for our work. I want to just acknowledge that today, know that we're looking into that and confirming with that. And because that you're making a recommendation today with final action in front of the council on July 13th, we thought that would give us some time in case we needed to make any changes to this recommendation ahead of that. But we did review and will continue to review the proposed projects against both the 2030 plan and the 2040 plan, which we don't ever do, but it is something we will do and ensure that we are not somehow not consistent with that judge's order in the interim.
Thanks. Questions on that? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I saw that, and it sounded like the biggest aspect of that was the doing away with the single-family zoning. These projects are typically ones that already had a higher zoning in the 2030 plan, correct?
Mr. Chair, committee members, certainly that was the sort of the hinge of the disagreement that brought the case. And yes, in our initial quick review this afternoon, it looks like the proposed projects are already consistent with the 2030 plan, and that really not much had changed between 2030 and 2040 besides some nomenclature. But because it was a cursory review, I don't want to say that was the final review on that, but certainly that was one of the kind of the core aspects of the case. But the judge's order was really broad. It was for everything across the plan, so, and not just the single-family portion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. Other questions on that report? Discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Martin has brought the recommendation that the Met Council award 9 tax-based vitalization account grants as shown in Table 1 of the business item and authorize the Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Councilmember Boucher. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And now, we'll do a chair rearrangement here and move on to our next non-consent business item, and that's 2022-177. These are proposed amendments to the Livable Communities Advisory Committee bylaws. Director Barajas will present.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, council members. I don't have a presentation for you today because it's about words on a page and wouldn't be all that interesting. But I did want to just give a brief overview. The Livable Communities Advisory Committee, as an advisory committee to the council that the council has established to advise them on awarding of Livable Communities demonstration account grants, had previously had their bylaws written just to be consistent with the open meeting law requirements of the council. During the pandemic, we had experienced, obviously, the ability to use virtual technology for a meeting, and especially with the LCAC, or Livable Communities Advisory Committee, found it incredibly efficient, especially for the applicants from around the region and developers associated with those applicants to be able to participate in the program or in those committee meetings, present their projects to the committee, as well as for our advisory committee members to participate as well. These are volunteer members of the community who use their time to advise us on these projects. Because LCAC is not subject to open meeting laws, the only thing that requires them to meet in person today is that their bylaws state as such. And so we are proposing to provide amendments to the bylaws that would give the LCAC flexibility to determine whether to meet in person or to meet virtually in order to achieve some of those efficiencies and ease of meeting administration in the coming year. So in the staff report that you'll see posted on our website and on your screens in front of you, you can see some proposed amendments related to some clerical terms, but as well as the specifics in particular that are in under Article 3 regarding committee meetings. One note I would like to make is that we did also include a provision that would allow for the chair or the regional administrator, the Metropolitan Council chair or the regional administrator to determine at any time whether we should be all meeting remotely or all in person for any particular reason. So while there's some flexibility for the committee, if there were, say, another pandemic and the Metropolitan Council chair were to declare that we shouldn't be meeting in person, then the LCAC would also need to follow suit, so to speak. So those are the proposed amendments that you'll see in the attachment to the business item, are primarily in Article 3, and then some conforming amendments related to those just to make the language consistent throughout, and some clerical revisions as well. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Got questions on that report or on this item? Before I ask for motion, I would just note that, my day job is with the community engagement organization, and one of the lessons through the pandemic and remote working is you can really actually increase community involvement when you're using technology and working remotely. So very supportive, so thank you. The proposed action is that we approve the proposed amendments to the Livable Communities Advisory Committee bylaws as shown in the attachment to the staff report. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Director Barajas. And with that, we move on to our two information items for the evening. The first is the Land Use Advisory Committee report, and that will be given by our representative, Councilmember Wolf.
Musical chairs again.
What's that?
Musical chairs.
It is musical chairs. I kind of like this. Thank you. And Councilmember Wolf.
Waiting for the presentation to come up, if that's okay. So Land Use Advisory Committee has representatives from every district, plus an extra one so that Carver County and Scott County can each have a representation in Councilmember Barber's district. And it has to be at least half elected officials, and we have 11 elected officials right now. We do have a vacancy in your district, Mr. Chair, because the person who was there, who is very good, moved to another district, unfortunately, and we have not yet been able to find a replacement. We went to meeting, we were meeting virtually and then went to meeting in person, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. So a lot of the things that we've been doing in LUAC are the same things that we've been doing in community development or committee of the whole meeting. So I'm not going to go into depth about the topics because you've seen them in our meetings as well. Although looking back at the comprehensive plan review process, one of the things that really came out in our discussion with LUAC was how much churn there is in city staff, planning commissioners, elected officials, that we have to start from zero teaching about what we're doing every single time and not assume that people remember what's going on from the last time. It's not good enough to just show what changed from 2030 to 2040, for example, but you have to go over the whole process because it's a whole new bunch of people every single time. So that's a lesson learned for the next, is to get started early with the local governments and go into detail about what we are looking for from them and what we expect, so that they don't kind of make it up in their own head as we're going. March 17th, we did the system statements and community designations. Community designations is a theme for this whole year. Every single meeting, we're having chunks on that and working through the process. And so we've been discussing the different variables and issues. And we did it again in May, except that because this was our first in-person meeting, we had a bunch of people with health things. We had people got caught in the storm because that was when the big hailstorm came through town, like 15 minutes before the meeting was supposed to start. So we ended up, we only had like 4 people at the meeting. So staff was able to get a lot of feedback from the people that were there, but we're also following up with the people that weren't there to try and get their feedback because of the iterative process with the community designations. If you miss a piece, that makes it harder to do the next piece. So we're trying to work on that sort of between meetings and catch up with people. And I've also been reaching out to people who sort of drifted away when we went to the online meetings and stopped attending. I've emailed everybody that has attendance issues, and a couple of them got back to me, but I'm gonna have to follow up by phone with some other people who still haven't gotten back, because we can't do our work without a quorum, and the conversation really misses something when you don't have all of the region as part of the conversation. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you, Councilmember Wolf, for that work and for the presentation, but also for representing us and for doing the kind of heavy lifting that you're doing. And we're very fortunate to have your representation there. Questions for Councilmember Wolf on that report? Any questions? Oh, we're moving here. So there's no action. That was an information item. So we'll move on to our second information item, our final item for the evening, the tax-based sharing in the metropolitan area for taxes payable in 2022. And is it Ms. Dietrich? Deb, are you presenting? Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm Deb Dietrich. I'm a planning analyst in local planning assistance. And I'm going to be talking about the Fiscal Disparities Program and focusing on new information for taxes payable in 2022. So to begin with, our metro area is really known for tax-based sharing. It's called the Fiscal Disparities Program. And through this program, taxing jurisdictions in the 7-county metro area share part of growth in commercial, industrial, net tax capacity, or tax base. The legislature passed the Fiscal Disparities Act in 1971, and it began operating in 1975. If you recall, about a year ago, actually, we had a whole panel presentation about the 50-year anniversary of the program. Tax-based sharing supports goals of the Metropolitan Council. Through tax-based sharing, as mentioned in your information item, taxing jurisdictions, well, I'm getting derailed here a little bit. I'm out of practice.
We all are.
But I wanted to say that the program supports cost-effective regional wastewater treatment and transportation services because it helps reduce competition for tax base. Through tax-based sharing, local taxing jurisdictions contribute 40% of growth in commercial industrial tax base to a shared pool that's redistributed. To catch up. That shared pool is redistributed. Commercial and industrial tax base includes commercial, industrial, and public utility tax base. The program is built into our property tax system. That means it's largely administered by county property tax administrators. And I'll just cover the basics on how it works. On the contribution side, it's straightforward. 40% of growth in commercial, industrial, and public utility tax base since 1971 is contributed into a shared pool. That's 40% of growth since the program was enacted in 1971. On the distribution side, the shared pool of tax base or area-wide tax base is redistributed using a formula based on population and relative property tax wealth. Relative property tax wealth is the market value of all property in the metro area per person compared to the average market value per person for the entire metro area. Because of that distribution formula, a community with relatively low property tax wealth receives a somewhat larger share from the area-wide pool. Conversely, an area with relatively high property tax wealth receives a somewhat lower share. For taxes payable in 2022, the program shared $543 million in tax base and almost $720 million in tax revenue. For net recipients or net gainers of tax base, the distribution from the shared pool was greater than the contribution to the shared pool. For taxes payable in 2022, there were 109 net recipients, including 90 cities and 19 townships. For net contributors, the contribution to the shared pool was greater than the distribution from the shared pool. There were 70 net contributors, including 48 cities and 22 townships. This is little change from results for taxes payable in 2021. If you look at the map here, the pink shade shows the top 20 net recipients of tax base, and the blue shows the top 20 net contributors. They're also listed to the left of the map. If you look at the blue shade, the top net contributors, you can really see how it reflects the concentration of commercial industrial development, and that's development that's attracted by regional investments and services, such as the 494, 694 ring, and the MSP airport. The top 5 net recipients of shared tax base for taxes payable in 2022 were St. Paul, Coon Rapids, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Columbia Heights. The top 5 net contributors include Minneapolis, Bloomington, Edina, Eden Prairie, and also Plymouth. As seen in this chart, the blue bar represents the shared pool of tax base as a percent of commercial industrial tax base in the metro area that has risen over time. The green shade shows the shared pool as a percent of total tax base. For taxes payable in 2022, the shared pool as a percent of commercial industrial tax base was over 36%. That's similar to what it was for taxes payable in 2010. For taxes payable in 2022, the shared pool as a percent of total tax base was about 10%. 179 communities participate in the program. 4 communities are excluded by statute, or 4 areas, I should say. 2 communities include New Prague and Northfield, and also the 2 major airports are excluded. The main reason why I'm mentioning participation in the program is because the council and the Minnesota Department of Revenue have a statutory role in determining eligibility to participate in the metro area program. And the council takes the lead in this annual determination. According to state statute, a community must be excluded if its comprehensive zoning and planning policies conscientiously exclude most commercial industrial development for reasons other than preserving an agricultural use. This was enacted so a community that deliberately excluded most commercial industrial development couldn't benefit from tax-based sharing. Sunfish Lake, Woodland, St. Mary's Point, and Birchwood Village are the 4 communities that are ineligible to participate. The program works to reduce big disparities in property tax wealth. The ratio of the highest to the lowest commercial industrial tax base per person for communities with a population of 10,000 or more would be 15-1 without tax-based sharing. With fiscal disparities, that difference narrows to 5-1. More information is available on our website. There are links to resources and reports. There's data and also a new section with historical information. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you, Ms. Dietrich. Questions on that report? Councilmember Wolf?
I don't have a question, but I think it's important to note that this is Deb's last meeting. She's retiring on us.
And Director Barajas is asked to speak to that, so maybe we'll just go right to that. Lisa?
Maybe we'll just go right to that. Thank you, Councilmember with committee members. I just really do want to thank Deb for all of her work here at the council. If you didn't know, Deb has been working for the council for over 34 years. It's just an amazing tenure with the council, and with that, an amazing institutional knowledge of complicated programs like fiscal disparities. There's probably maybe one other person in the state that knows this program as well as Deb, and they are not at the council. So it's something we were sorely miss her skills, her knowledge, her expertise, her organizational skills in helping to keep LUAC running, which she has been staffing since 2011, as well as her incredible knowledge of the history of the council. So many times I remember, even just in the last planning cycle, working with Deb, asking, like, why don't we try this? And she said, actually, the council did do something like that. And she'd help me find a report that was something from, I don't know, 1978 or 1986 on something or the other that was incredibly helpful. So really have enjoyed my time working with the council. And I know that we have greatly benefited from her knowledge and expertise here, and she will be sorely missed. So thank you, Deb.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Deb? We thank you for your service and for all the people that sat in these chairs before us as well that you've supported. Thank you. And you're leaving quite a legacy in the region.
I appreciate that. I would like to say that I've so enjoyed working with my coworkers and local planning assistants. And also, I have really stayed at the council because my work responsibilities kept changing, and above all, I have had a lot of opportunity to keep learning new things.
Again, thanks for your service. Enjoy your retirement.
I will.
And we will miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, committee members? Director Barajas?
Just to note that we will be canceling our July 5th Community Development Committee meeting, so enjoy your day off or your afternoon off. I know a lot of our staff will be taking some long overdue vacations, so it'll be a good break for all of us, and we'll see you again in the middle of July.
Thank you. Michelle, anything?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.